Have you ever seen one of those progressive commercials? You know, the ones where he's trying to stop people from becoming their parents? Every single one of those commercials lands for me. Maybe because they're funny, maybe because they're painfully accurate, or maybe because I had a realization the other day. I'm slowly turning into my dad. The mustache was the first clue. Then came the chamula huaraches I talked about in a previous video, and now this shirt. But before we get into that, hi everyone. If you're new here, my name is Saul. One of my hobbies is making these videos about clothes. If you'd like to get in on the I subscribed when he had fewer than 50 subscribers club, now would be an excellent time. And if you've been here a little while already, thank you for coming back. Welcome to another installment of what I'm affectionately referring to as adult show and tell. Today's story starts with Comoli. If you clicked on this video, chances are that you are already familiar with the brand, which is great, because I'd rather spend our time talking about why this piece mattered to me rather than trying to summarize 15 years of company history. Still, just a little context. Comoli is a Japanese brand founded in 2011 by, please excuse the forthcoming mispronunciation, Keijiro Komori. Their philosophy is deceptively simple: make clothes for everyday life, relaxed silhouettes, exceptional fabrics, quiet construction, the kinds of garments that don't ask for attention but reward it. They're designed with the Japanese climate in mind, borrowing from American and European workwear while filtering everything through a distinctly understated lens. In other words, exactly the sort of rabbit hole I'd eventually fall into. I'll admit something. When I first started getting seriously interested in clothes, I gravitated almost exclusively toward the big names, the Burberrys and Mont Blancs of the world, brands whose histories stretch back over a century. Part of the appeal wasn't just the garments, it was the continuity and the rich history. I liked the idea that generations of people had owned pieces from those same houses. And don't get me wrong, I still love those brands. But somewhere along the way, my thinking shifted. I started wondering something different. How incredible would it have been to buy from Hermes, say, in the 1850s? Not because it was Hermes as we know it today, but because it wasn't yet. Imagine buying something from a young workshop that generations later would become one of the great houses. Imagine passing that piece down, not because it had become valuable, because they had become part of your family's story. That thought has stayed with me because when I buy certain garments, not all of them, but some of them, I genuinely hope that they outlive me. I hope somebody inherits them one day. Maybe they'll wear them, maybe they'll simply keep them. Either way, I like the idea that these videos are becoming part of that history, a little record of where they came from, who wore them, what life they lived before coming into someone else's. That's also changed how I think about supporting smaller brands. I don't see it simply as purchasing clothes anymore. I see it as participating, however modestly, in what I hope becomes their story. Every established house was, of course, once somebody's small company. Every heritage brand started somewhere. And while I certainly don't buy things hoping they'll become collectible, I do enjoy supporting people who are trying to make genuinely thoughtful garments. Not because they already have 200 years of history behind them, but because maybe one day they will. And if not, I still get to enjoy a beautifully made shirt. That seems like a pretty good outcome too. I first came across Comoli through Mohawk General Store. By now, you've probably realized that I trust certain retailers almost as much as I trust particular brands. There's something I really appreciate about thoughtful curation. A good retailer isn't just selling clothes, they're making an argument. They're saying, these brands belong in conversation with one another. I find that particularly fascinating because the more I pay attention to those conversations, the more I discover brands that I wouldn't have found on my own. Comoli was one of them, and eventually one shirt in particular caught my attention. The wool silk open collar shirt in black. And before we talk about why I bought it, I should probably tell you why I considered not doing so. If you've spent any time looking at Comoli, you'll notice something pretty quickly. There's a lot of black, which funnily enough felt like coming home. If you watched my last few videos, you know I've slowly been moving away from wearing almost exclusively all black. At one point, I honestly think that I could have gotten dressed in the dark, but that doesn't mean that I've stopped loving the color black. There were really 3 reasons I bought this shirt. The first was pretty simple. I wanted a Comoli piece. If you've watched this channel for a bit, you know that's usually how purchases begin for me. First the brand, then the garment. The second was the fabric. It's made from a blend of wool and silk. Not exactly what most people picture when they think of a summer shirt, but the moment I read the description, I knew I wanted to feel it for myself. The fabric has this soft, airy hand that almost floats. It feels substantial without feeling heavy at all. It's one of those fabrics that makes you instinctively slow down, which now that I think about it, probably describes Comoli as a whole. The third reason I didn't realize until after it arrived, the shirt reminds me a lot of my dad. Growing up, these were the shirts that he wore. Not this exact shirt, not Comoli, but this silhouette and open collar button-up. Short sleeves, always. I never really gave it much thought as a kid. It was just what dad wore. Today, I put it on, looked in the mirror, and realized, so do I. It's kind of funny. When you're younger, I think we tend to spend so much energy trying to develop our own style. You don't necessarily want to dress exactly like your parents. You want to dress like yourself. Then one day, without anyone telling you, you find yourself gravitating toward exactly the kinds of things that they wore. Not because they wore them, because they make sense, because they're comfortable, because they fit your life, and suddenly you understand. I also realized something else. These shirts occupy an interesting space in a wardrobe. They're not t-shirts, they're not traditional button-ups or button-downs. They're somewhere in between. They're almost the loafer equivalent of a shirt. Relaxed, easy, slightly more intentional than a t-shirt, slightly less formal than a button-up, and somehow exactly right. To me, this shirt represents not just another purchase, not just another brand, just the next thing that I'll live in. One thing I've been asking myself more and more over the last year or so is the following. What is this garment asking of me? If you've watched some of my recent videos, you'll know this has quietly become one of my favorite questions to return to. I think this shirt is asking me to stop thinking of influence as the opposite of individuality. Because somewhere along the way, I realized something. For years, I thought developing personal style meant becoming less like everyone else. Less like trends, less like advertisements, and yet, here I am, wearing the same kind of shirt my dad has worn for decades. Not because I consciously copied him, because after enough years of living my own life, I arrived at many of the same conclusions that he did. Comfort matters, natural fiber matters, buying something you'll actually wear matters. Some lessons don't need to be bought. Sometimes they're simply lived long enough that another generation eventually discovers them on their own. That's actually one of my favorite things about clothes. They can carry memories. Sometimes they're our own, sometimes they're someone else's, sometimes they quietly become both. When I put this shirt on, I'm obviously not pretending to be my dad. It's still me. My wardrobe is still my wardrobe. But I have a feeling that every now and then I'll catch a glimpse of myself in the mirror and I'll think, oh, that's where I got that from. I don't know whether this shirt will become one of those pieces that I wear for the next 10 years. I hope it does. I hope the wool softens. I hope the silk changes. I hope it develops those little signs of wear that make it unmistakably mine. And if one day somebody inherits it, maybe they'll watch this video. Maybe they'll laugh at the fact that I spent this long talking about one shirt. Or maybe they'll put it on, look in the mirror, and recognize a little bit of me. The same way I recognized a little bit of my dad. If that happens, I'd say this shirt did exactly what it was supposed to do. Thank you for spending a little time with me today. I've been experimenting with these longer conversations centered around one particular garment. I would genuinely love to know whether you prefer this format or the more traditional pickup format where I discuss multiple pieces in one video, or if you enjoy both equally. Also, I'm curious, has there ever been a moment where you realized you were slowly turning into one of your parents? It doesn't have to be clothes, maybe it's coffee, maybe it's gardening, maybe it's making noises every time you stand up. Please let me know down in the comments. I have a feeling I'm not alone. And as always, please don't forget to dislike and unsubscribe. But seriously, thank you for being here. Nos vemos.